The president has worked very hard to implement a strategy when it comes to the border that is humane, safe, and has orderly enforcement. Things are going at the border, sir.
Much better than you all expected.
We have a secure border, and that is a priority for any nation, including ours.
We have Julie Kirchner, Executive Director of FAIR, the Federation of American Immigration Reform. Julie, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
When you hear that, does it cause some facial expressions that shouldn't be seen on camera?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah, it's these are pretty trying times we're going through.
First of all, a little about what happened to Dan. Just because we've known Dan for so long, is he still there, or is he retired, or what's going on?
Oh, well, that's very nice of you to ask. Dan is still with us. He is planning to retire. He's going to phase out. I mean, he's been with the organization nearly 40 years.
Yes,
so I think
yes.
he's earned a little rest and relaxation time with his grandkids.
He's a great guy. I had a chance to meet him a couple of times, being there doing the Radio Row in Washington, and a great guy, and the whole crew there at FAIR. So welcome aboard, and it's good to have you on. You heard the opening cut there on our liner as far as the amount of fentanyl coming through. And there's just so much that's inundating us, it's hard to keep up with everything. But the Palestinian deal now is worrying a lot of people, watching how vocal and how adamant these folks are in places where their population is already quite strong. And when you start letting in this many people, what happens to the trajectory of, let's say, first of all, local governments for the future generations?
Yeah, I think there are several important factors here. You know, no country on the face of the earth can really sustain the kind of influx of people that we're having right now. We are talking about record, historic numbers of people pouring over the border. I mean, in the last 3 years, I was just doing the tally because it keeps going up every single month. We're talking about maybe 9 million illegal immigrants coming across the border, 1.7 million gotaways on top of that. We are looking at record numbers, and they tend, because most migrants tend to go to urban areas, they want jobs. Most of them are economic migrants. They're not asylum seekers. Well, they might apply for asylum, but they won't qualify. And then these local communities are feeling the strain. You know, they're the ones left holding the bag. And it's the local communities who have to do something with them, find shelter, find food. The kids start enrolling in school, and then suddenly the locals are paying for the cost. I mean, we all are paying for the cost for this administration's immigration policies. And it puts a strain on everything, and then you layer in, so that's kind of the big overarching picture, but then you layer in some of these other risks, people who maybe don't necessarily want to assimilate, maybe people who like living in a cluster with people like themselves, and they don't necessarily want to learn English, or maybe they don't necessarily, want to adopt the American way of life, and then you begin to have a culture clash.
Absolutely.
And so these are really difficult subjects we're dealing with.
There is an interesting dynamics, and I'm not sure this one's been thought out, but in places like Chicago and New York, in other places where the local residents, specifically in the poor neighborhoods, and also specifically African Americans, are absolutely irate. The infrastructure was totally controlled by Democrats in most of these major cities, because anyone wealthy or at least tax-paying Democrat and Republicans had moved out. So what's going to happen to these people? Because, I mean, if they get these immigrants registered, Democrats are going to have a solid lock, regardless of what the existing citizens think about or care about.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I mean, again, anytime you have this kind of these numbers come in such a short period of time, you create havoc. And so they've created all of these dynamics. I mean, it's the perfect storm, really. And I think, what we see going on with some of these migrants, I mean, eventually, especially the asylum seekers, for those who actually apply and do get it, I mean, most of them don't, they'll be registered, they'll become citizens, they'll be registered to vote. And we're seeing people who value state welfare systems, who value, who think that more government is good, and they will probably trend towards the Democratic Party because that's what they believe in. So it's going to be a total lock.
And when the real transition of America changes is in the next census, when everything is reapportioned and they are counted. And I think that's the end game. There was an interesting interview that I'd like you to listen to with me. It's Jason Jones, who was a big guy. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about in the border fight world. And he was with Dr. Phil, who was down on the border. But everybody's trying to grasp, what are the numbers actually? What are they? And here's a little bit of that interview with Dr. Phil and Jason Jones. If I can get it turned up here, we'll do it. Let's see. Apparently, I'm having some difficulty on it, so which is not unusual, so we'll figure it out a little bit later on.
But I do think that's an excellent point. These are the numbers that we know. And actually, I was talking to some of my colleagues were down at the border at a conference, law enforcement conference, and apparently there was some quiet talk behind the scenes about how maybe we don't fully understand the numbers, that especially the gotaways are being undercounted. Now, we don't know that for sure, but it's not hard to imagine. And then there are people who get in that we don't know. And when you think about the numbers, I mean, it only took, a couple of dozen people to, execute 9/11. I mean, it really is not hard to think about the security risks that we're dealing with. And we don't know the numbers. We don't know the numbers. And they're bringing in, a lot of them are bringing in drugs. A lot of them are part of organized crime. And even if they don't want to be part of organized crime, they get sucked into it. They pay these smugglers to come in, and then they're wiring money home. And before you know it, I mean, they're deeper in, this crime syndicates than anyone could ever imagine.
Isn't that the difference? And I know you've been doing this for a while. From 10 or 15 years ago, you had people who really wanted to come and loved America and wanted to. Now you've got these people who are thumbing their noses at us, and also you've got. I was watching a couple of films yesterday, and they kept asking, where did you come from? Well, we came from Venezuela. We came from China. How did you get here? Where did you fly into? Oh, no, we walked. You walked all the way from China? How did you do that? And these people, they look like they had shopped at a high-end dress store. And I thought, how many of these people are actually with drug cartels and, I don't know, maybe from government informants, whatever the hell they could be. But it's a different immigrant situation we have today of entitlement and also gangs that are very, very sophisticated. Yeah,
it's very different. So I started working, holy cow, I'm going to age myself here. I started working this issue in 2005, so nearly 20 years ago. And back then, it was almost all from Mexico or maybe, the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, El Salvador, right here in Central America. And now we see migrants coming from almost every continent. There's a record number of Chinese that are coming over. I mean, 50,000 in a year. I mean, it's crazy.
It's crazy.
And then there are people, and the thing is, a lot of them will come in, they might fly directly to Mexico, or there's certain countries like Ecuador where they don't require certain people to have visas, which is a little unusual, and so they come in, and then they fly in, and then they pay the smugglers to come up. So there are a whole slew of dynamics coming up, but it used to be much simpler.
Yes, it did.
It used to be economic migrants,
I want to continue this conversation. I did find the volume button on the Dr. Phil cut.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll play that when we come back in just a moment. Julie Kirchner, Executive Director, FAIR.
Jason Jones is a border intelligence expert and retired captain from the Counterterrorism Division, where he targeted leaders of the Mexican cartel. And he's seen it all and says this is the largest U.S. intelligence failure since 9/11. Since the new administration, 6 million people have come across the border. I've also heard that it's closer to 15 and up million people have come across the border. Where do you put that number?
10.5 million under the last administration. That's not a perception. That's not a feeling. Anybody watching right now can go to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, look at the data on the website, and it'll show you. And then you add 2 million known gotaways to that, because those are the known gotaways the Border Patrol collects. Doc, those are just the ones we know about. Okay. We don't know what we don't know and how many others have come as well.
So you're saying a solid number is closer to like 13 million, easy.
Yes. Unbelievable. Julie Kirchner, Executive Director of FAIR, 13 million. We hear numbers, Julie, bounce around. Yeah. And with anything we're talking about, and I was just talking to the Lieutenant Governor in the previous interview, and you almost double whatever numbers they give you. Trump says it could be possibly, before we know it all, nearly 20 million. But your thoughts?
Well, we know, so what we know is the numbers, the official numbers, as Jason was saying, yes, they're on the website. You can tally them up. Mm-hmm. And we are looking at easily 11 to 12 million when you count in the gotaways. And, of course, we know there are a lot of people who have come in and we weren't able to count them. So, sometimes the gotaways, it's not a perfect science, but there is a science. Officers, so let's say they do one of these high-speed busts and all the migrants come flowing out of the car. They may catch 2 or 3 of them, but they know that 4 ran off, right, and 4 got away.
Right.
And they do tally these things. And they do have cameras, assuming they're working, on these high poles and things stationed along the border. So they can visibly see people coming in, even if they can't catch them. So they have that tally. So we're looking at 11 to 12 million, but Jason's absolutely right. We don't know what we don't know, and it could be a lot more. And, of course, there are people coming in through the northern border. I hear now there are boats landing. The boats landing in the San Diego sector and
Crazy.
Certainly in Florida. That's becoming a bigger problem, too. We were looking and talking about just what we know. I was thinking about this for your viewers. In a 2-year period, the last 2 years, 2021, 2023, there were 70,000 special interest aliens who caught crossing the border. And these special interest aliens are people who come from, what should we say, atypical countries where you might suspect terrorist activity, 70,000. And there were over 6,000 Afghans, over 3,000 Egyptians, over 600 Iranians, speaking about, the conflict in Israel, the war over there right now, over 500 Syrians, and that's just part of that total. And then you've got another 700 people caught who were actually on the terror watch list. So this is what you get as a result of open borders. This is what you get. I mean, we are paying for it in so many ways. We are paying for it at the local level. We are paying for it at the state level. Our taxes are going to the federal government so they can pay nonprofits to help bus these people all over the country and then give them food and then give them shelter. We're paying for them in wages that go down because, of course, when you're here illegally and you want to work, you work for next to nothing because it's better than not eating. And then, we're giving millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to these countries, which is, the vice president's brilliant idea of addressing root causes. Yeah, we'll address root causes by sending more money to these home countries who then send their migrants to us. And they don't use it to stop anything. They just say, thank you very much. We won't bother you for another year.
Here, Julie, is where you hate to play reality. And the reality is, boy, I even hate to mention this. Is there a possibility? Is there any way on God's green earth for us to get them back out of here? And the answer is probably no. Not at least maybe, I don't know, 15, 20% of them, maybe.
Yeah, probably. Well, we can do it. We certainly have this infrastructure and the system to do it. The question is, do we have the political will? And that is really tough. And, if I were advising someone in office or someone running for office, I would be saying focused on the ones who came most recently.
Absolutely.
These are the ones we haven't screened yet. These are the ones, this flood. Focus, because that alone is 10 million, right? We were just tallying up the numbers, 10, 11, 12 million. Focus on the ones who don't have the roots here yet, who don't, who just came in, we haven't screened. Yep. You start with that, and at least you can make a dent. But the bigger problem is the political will. And I hope, all your listeners out there are talking to, their members of Congress, their local lawmakers, and saying, hey, look, we support immigration enforcement, because the reason most people, the people who come here legally, come here because this is the country where the law matters, right? The rule of law, where everyone is equal, when they go before a judge. And that's why people have been coming to this country for generations, when they come legally, right? When they respect the system and they respect our laws. It's really important. I really want to emphasize, people think their voices don't matter, and they really do. They just have to call, write letters, do stuff.
This narrative that the president keeps up, look, it's not my fault. I've offered a bill. If they wanted to help us out and on a bipartisan basis, go on and pass this bill, but my hands are tied. I can't do anything. If there's 10 people out there, and if it resonates with one, that one's got to be an idiot.
Yeah, that bill was a total disaster. And what I was shocked was that the media, it's almost as if no one read it. We read it. We went through it line by line. Yep. And what was the biggest disaster about that bill, for your readers so they know, is that it required the release of anyone simply claiming asylum. Well, shoot, how's that different than what we're doing now? It's just releasing everyone. Everyone will claim asylum. That if that had passed into law, it would have been, hey, all you have to say is, I'm afraid of going home, or I want to claim asylum. They're all coached on what to say by all these NGOs operating in Central America, and they would have to be released. Nothing really would have changed. So that was one of the biggest.
Well, how could you get past the 5,000 quota? How do you even get past that one?
I know. That was crazy. And you know what? Again, the news didn't cover it. Even if you thought 5,000 was acceptable, which of course is crazy to say, oh yeah, we'll let 5,000 in a day. That provision expired after 3 years. So you know what you get? You get the permanent changes to the asylum system, and all the enforcement after 3 years goes poof. It's wiped off the books. So it was just totally a shell game of what was going on. So, 5,000 a day, it's just like sanctioning, everyone from the world coming in. It's crazy.
It really is sad when you see, especially when you look at the head honcho Mayorkas on some of the things that he said. It's really sad. I had one other cut here, and I was going to see if I could play that one. I think it was Mayorkas. I'll have to find it also later. Having some problems with that computer. But where do we go from here? What's next as far as Congress is concerned? And I don't think there is anything from now through November. It's all written in stone. He's going to get as many people through as he possibly can. And the Republicans just do not have the power in Washington to do anything.
No, they really don't. And it's sad, and it's really frustrating for people who've been working in this business for a long time. It's very frustrating. The narrow majority in the House it's almost paralyzed them. And so, for example, what's really next is your listeners I'm sure they'll see in the news, the foreign aid bill looks like it might be coming up in the House, and this is the bill that was going to give money to Israel and Ukraine. And
yes,
and we don't know what version of it is going to come up. Actually, the text might even come out today. We don't know what's going to go on, but we don't even know if they're going to do any border security measures. They might just give it up completely.
Hopefully, they're talking about partial this out. In other words, making it individual as far as the aid is concerned. That's going to be a big story. Look, great job. I wish we had more time. I look forward to getting you on again. Do not be a